This is Christopher John Björknes. It is August 5th, 2023. I have a good subject today, but first I'd like to thank all of the wonderful people who have contributed to make this video possible. I would not have been able to do it without your kind donations. I am extremely grateful to you. I hope everyone else appreciates as much as I do the fact that you have enabled me to do this research and produce this video. Thank you again. Anyone who would like to contribute can do so in the links in the description below. You can also find those same links at my website, CJBBooks.com. There will be a link to that in the description as well. Again, thank you very much. I have a really good video. It'll probably be next, a really important one. And again, I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you. Recently, at the UFO hearings, a Navy pilot, Ryan Graves, said that they had spotted a cube-like UFO or UAP, and that's very interesting. A friend of mine several years ago had been taking pictures of cube sculptures around the world, and he became very enthusiastic and excited when the images of Saturn came back depicting the hexagram, which appears on the pole. And he drew my attention to that and to the Tesseract, which I was familiar with in my work on Albert Einstein's plagiarism and the fourth dimension. And then I sent my friend a bunch of citations for Charles Howard Hinton. And I'm going to break all that down today because there is a lot of very esoteric and very interesting facets to the mystery of the cube, especially in the Abrahamic faiths. The Holy of Holies in the Temple of Solomon was a cube which was completely dark on the inside. In other words, it was a black cube. The New Jerusalem, which is planned to descend from the heavens, will be in the form of a cube if everything goes according to plan. The cross can be derived from unfolding a cube and spreading out its 6 faces. The Star of David can be derived from the cube if the cube is tilted and projected on a 2-dimensional plane. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff. So let's start digging into all of that. So I'm going to show you a couple of clips which are available on YouTube, which depict, well, the first is going to show that Navy pilot talking about the cube that they said they spotted in the sky when they were flying. And this is from the History Channel and their YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube yourself and watch the whole thing. I'll play a couple seconds of it to give you an idea of what was being discussed.
You can see it kind of looks like a cube.
It has these kind of little points that stick out. It does seem to be darker in color and not like a bright, shining balloon, whatever.
So it is portrayed as a dark or black, grayish, dark cube. In the hearings, it was described as being contained within a translucent sphere. And we have this clip from the hearings.
Briefs. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter.
So They are prepping us for the idea that UFOs will appear as black cubes, and that's particularly interesting given the ancient lore surrounding cubes and the religious significance that cubes take on. Randall Carlson demonstrated several correlations in a video that was produced, Randall Carlson's Cosmic Patterns and Cycles of Catastrophe, which was put on Cameron Wiltshire's Sacred Geometry International website, and he produced, animated, arranged, edited, composited, authored, and graphically designed the video. And I suggest everyone watch that. Randall Carlson pointed out that the moon is 2,160 miles in diameter, and that when you take the internal angles on each face of the cube, it adds up to 360 degrees, and that there are 6 faces on a cube, and therefore a cube contains 2,160 degrees. And Carlson also correlated that to 1 month on the 12 months of the zodiac represents 2,160 years. And I'm going to delve very deeply into all of that. The mythology of New Jerusalem in the book of Revelations relates very heavily to this. It says, I'm reading from the Wikipedia page on New Jerusalem. It says in Revelation chapter 21, verse 16, that the height, length, and width are of equal dimensions, as it was with the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle and first temple. They measured 12,000 furlongs, which is approximately 1,500.3 miles, or 1 furlong equaling approximately 220 years. The mythology is that there will be this heavenly cube, this massive heavenly cube, which will descend upon the earth. And Christians are very much looking forward to that. So these ETs kind of represent that on a very much smaller scale. And we are being conditioned to look to the heavens for our salvation or for our judgment and destruction. And that is what I want to emphasize very strongly, is that this portrayal of UFOs as cubes is part of an ancient plan to condition us to the idea that heavenly beings will descend to the earth, either to save us or to destroy us. And I'm going to get more deeply into that in my next video. This is from the Wikipedia page on Solomon's Temple and the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was located in the westernmost end of the temple building, being a perfect cube, 20 cubits by 20 cubits by 20 cubits. The inside was in total darkness and contained the Ark of the Covenant, gilded inside and out, in which was placed the tables of the covenant. So the Holy of Holies was also a cube, and it was dark inside. So in other words, it was a black cube. The significance of the 12,000 furlong dimension of the New Jerusalem cube, which is planned to descend from heaven, be 1,500 miles wide, deep, and high, which is impossible. But it depicts the 144,000 Jewish male virgins who are said in Christianity to inherit the world to come. And the way that is derived mathematically is that each edge of the cube of the New Jerusalem is said to be 12,000 furlongs. There are 12 edges on a cube, so if you multiply 12,000 furlongs by 100 and by the 12 edges, you get 144,000. This is from Revelation chapter 14. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Foreheads is significant because of the fact that the tefillin these days is in the form of a black cube. And I heard a sound from heaven, like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They followed the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. So the cube takes on a great deal of significance in both Judaism and Christianity, and in Islam as well. The Kaaba, which predates Islam, is a cuboid form. And for several centuries, it has been draped in a black veil, so it signifies also a black cube. And the Muslims circle it through 7 times, representing the cycle of the 7 planets revolving around the earth and the migration of their souls across the 7 planets to the planet Saturn, the highest planet in the highest sphere of the planetary system of the ancients. Set in the corner of the Kaaba is a black stone, which is thought to be a meteorite. That's significant because it is like a UFO. It is a meteor from outer space, which has been set in the cornerstone of the Kaaba, which is very telling. The tefillin that they wear when they engage in prayer is also today in the form of black cubes. And that may well derive from the ancient Egyptians because statues of Osiris depict her wearing a black cube on her forehead. This is from an article in the Jerusalem Post. A case in point is the goddess Isis, who stands behind her deceased husband, the pharaoh Osiris, wearing such a black box on her head as depicted on the mummy of Kep-ha-esses of the 2nd century BCE in the Copenhagen Glyptotic Museum. It's also quite interesting to note that there is a private Israeli intelligence agency that is called Black Cube. And you can read about them as well on Wikipedia. And there is also the preeminent multinational investment company called BlackRock, which has about $9 trillion in assets and was involved with the Fed and the Treasury. This is Charles Howard Hinton, who wanted to extend the cube into the 4th dimension. The concept was that if you have the algebraic term x and you have it to the first power, it represents a line as opposed to a point. And then if you take it to the second power, in other words, squared, you can derive a plane. And if you put it to the third power, cubed, you can arrive at a cube. And in this way, algebra can be converted into geometry. And then Charles Howard Hinton wanted to take that a step further, and he wanted to move from the cube to x to the fourth power, or x, y, z, t, or whatever you want to make the fourth dimension, and therefore reify abstract geometry, abstract algebra, and create a new geometry out of it, which was four-dimensional. And J.B. Stallo objected to that reification of the abstraction of algebra and said that you can only have three axes to space because only three axes can be perpendicular to one another. And if you try to introduce a fourth axis into three-dimensional space, it doesn't work. So he kind of made fun of Hinton and Riemann for creating absurdities out of the idea of reifying abstract algebra. So let's get into some of the esoteric aspects of the cube and how it relates to religion and how we are being conditioned to accept the idea that these cubes are descending from outer space, because one of the fundamental tenets of Judaism and Christianity, and evidently Islam in a very abstract way as well, is that there will be this heavenly descent of a cube in the form of the New Jerusalem, the temple of God in heaven, and the temple of God on earth being unified. And let's break that down. A cube is composed of 6 square faces, and the internal angles at each corner on the face of a cube represent 90 degrees. So if you add up those 4 90 degrees, you end up with 360 degrees. 360 degrees represents a complete circle. So that is how you square the circle and circle the square. And a circle represents a revolution or one day. There are 6 days of creation. So the cube represents the 6 days of creation. In the very middle of the cube is the temple. The temple represents the 7th day of the world to come, Olam Haba. This relates, as Randall Carlson pointed out, to the zodiac, representing 12 months. Each month is a lunar cycle. There are 12 lunar cycles in a year. In the ancient year, it was thought that there were 360 days. So if you take the 4 corners of the square on the face of a cube and you measure the internal angles, again, they add up to 360. And since there are 6 faces on a cube, you end up with 2,160 degrees of all the internal angles on the faces of a cube. Each month on the 12-month year of the zodiac is composed of 2,160 years. The moon is said to be 2,160 miles in diameter. Now, this is somewhat arbitrary in the way that you measure it. Different unit systems would produce different results, but Randall Carlson goes very deeply into how miles are measured, and he wants to prove that there is something more to it than simply the arbitrary nature of the units used in measuring. It's also important to always keep in mind when people are trying to derive some mystical meaning from all of this, that our system of measuring angles is derived from a very ancient Mesopotamian base 60 mathematical system. So it is built in, engineered into that system, that you're going to get the same kind of numbers over and over again whenever you're working with angles and proportions, especially with such regular angles as you find on platonic solids, that you're going to bump into the same numbers over and over again. And that has to do not with the nature of the universe, but with the nature of proportion and the abstract nature of human mathematics. So I'm warning people, don't draw too much into this. But it is also very important to understand that Freemasons and other people do draw into this very mystical meanings, and they base their plans and prophecies on their interpretations of the mystical significance of what they call this sacred geometry. So it's important to be aware of how they think, but it is equally and even more important to realize that the fundamental basis for all this is that a base 60 numbering system was at the root of all this, and our human abstractions of space, time, and dimension are going to produce similar results because they derive from these same patterns and constructions of our conscious interpretations of the physical world. So they speak more to human consciousness, human abstraction, and the nature of the abstractions of mathematics and geometry that human beings create than they do to the fundamental nature of the universe. In terms of the religious elements related to the cube, if you pivot a cube and then project it on a two-dimensional plane, you derive a hexagram along the outer edges of the cube. And from that hexagram, you can draw a Star of David, which has in the core of it another hexagram, which again represents the center or the temple of the kingdom of the seventh day. And the 6 triangles surrounding the seventh day represent the 6 days of creation, the 6 days of work to produce the Sabbath of the 7th millennium, and the temple, which is the center of the universe and the center of the Star of David. Each one of the points of the Star of David represent directions: above, below, northeast, south, and west. So there are deep religious meanings drawn from all of these symbols. And the Christian cross can also be derived from the cube. If you were to take the faces of the cube out of a paper box making a cube, you could derive the cross by unfolding the 6 faces into 4 squares by 3 squares pointing downwards. And this also signifies the 4 directions. And it represents, in very esoteric occultism, a sword, the flaming sword that the cherubim use to keep Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. It is a sword pointing down to the center of the earth, which is hell. And Jesus represents Satan, Samael, the serpent on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, chasing Adam and Eve with the sword. Jesus is the sword, the avenging sword. He bears the sword, driving human beings into hell and keeping them out of the Garden of Eden. In Empedocles, Plato, and Aristotle's system of the elements, the cube represents the earth. Fire is represented by the tetrahedron. Ether, the ether of outer space, is the dodecahedron. Air is the octahedron. And the element water is the icosahedron. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but I'm almost certain I didn't. Now, another thing, that friend who went around the world photographing where all these black cubes were appearing as statues was very excited when the pictures from Saturn came back and showed that there's a hexagram on the planet Saturn. Planet Saturn is hugely significant in Judaism and the ancient religions of the Phoenicians, Canaanites, Greeks, and Romans. Saturn, again, is in the most distant of the seven heavens from the Earth in the ancient system of the geocentric cosmos. And therefore, it was thought to represent the realm closest to the divine realm of the Holy One, the monad, which was the furthest from the earth, the most perfect, and the most divine. Saturn was the Greek god Kronos, signifying time. The Romans called Kronos Saturn. And in the Bible, Saturn appears as Moloch and Remphan. And Moloch is the god to whom the ancient Israelites, Canaanites, and Phoenicians used to sacrifice their firstborn children. And another thing that's very important about this is Charles Howard Hinton's concept of the tesseract. A tessera was a little black die that Christians used to use as a passcode to identify one another. It was kind of a secret system. They would meet in secret and discuss their most esoteric mystery religion secrets with one another, and only those initiates who bore the tessera, the little black cube, would be allowed to enter into those meanings. And that's where Charles Howard Hinton derived his word tesseract to represent, again, going from the line to the square, the cube, and then into the fourth dimension. So a lot of ufologists want to interpret this to mean that the cube signifies a portal into the fourth dimension, and the hexagram and the Star of David, and with the temple in the middle signifying the seventh day, is a portal into the world to come. And we are being conditioned to look to the heavens for either our salvation, our judgment, or both. And I find that very concerning, because I think we're being set up to fulfill these ancient religious conceptions. And the tell is that this is being sold to us as the descent of cubes from the heavens. And not simply cubes, but black cubes. The black cube represents the god Seth Typhon, the god of Israel, who is the god of darkness and chaos. So we are being conditioned to believe that this cube will descend to us, and some of us will be raptured into the world to come, while others of us are judged and destroyed. So I don't think it's mere coincidence that we are seeing this black cube appear all over the world. I think it is fulfillment of a very, very ancient plan related to the planet Saturn and to the Holy of Holies, the god Seth Typhon, who is a god of destruction, chaos, and darkness. So they are trying to lead us towards a world of darkness. And I'm trying to alert the world to these facts, and we need to take action to put an end to this process of destroying the world and setting us up to be judged in the name of the salvation of the righteous and the complete extermination of the Rishoyim, the wicked. We should not be marching towards a universal conception on the earth that there are two kinds of people, righteous and wicked, that only the righteous will be permitted to survive, and they will have the right to judge and exterminate the wicked. I want to thank you very much for watching. I again want to thank the wonderful people, the kind and generous people who donated and made this video possible. I have a good one coming up where I'm going to delve into these issues very much more deeply and explain how the Bible is a plan for all of this. Everyone can pick up a Bible and read about what I'm going to be discussing and realize that what we are seeing on our computer screens and across the media is nothing new. It is instead conditioning us to play a role in a scripted play that was written about 2,500 years ago, which calls for our judgment and extermination. So we are in imminent danger, and it doesn't have to happen. It is not truly prophetic. It is in no sense divine. It is not extraterrestrial. It is not supernatural. It's not coming from the divine realm or outer space. It was instead scripted, again, by people about 2,500 years working on Platonic, well, about 2,300 years ago, working on Platonic philosophy, drawing from it implications which applied to their conception of Egyptian mythology and the idea that there are cycles to the cosmos, and the destruction of one cycle becomes the beginning of the next cycle, and they see that as a necessary process that they want to accelerate so they can experience it in their own lifetimes and literally put us all through hell so that this old world that we live on this spinning orb of the earth will be destroyed, and then a new world will emerge in which only those people who fulfill these ancient plans will survive, and the rest of us will be cleansed away because we are thought to be wicked and evil. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye for now.